His reputation, Warren Buffett was the man who said that you can build a reputation for 50 years and lose it in 5 minutes. Reputation for corporates is more important than ever. There are quite a few surveys of reputation, and we have a Plus 94 one here. And joining me is Sifiso Falala, who's the Chief Executive and founder of Plus 94 Research, and Vukani Magubane, who's Director of Public Affairs and Communications at Coca-Cola South Africa. And no surprises for guessing that Coke came top of this particular survey. But let's ask Sifiso. Good morning to you, Sifiso, and welcome. There are, as I say, several measures of reputation. How does yours work, and why should we trust it?
Okay, the first thing about it is that it looks at the top companies in South Africa, from whom so much is expected, the top 50 companies, based on their advertising spend. The reason why the top 50 is because they are very visible in the public domain, not just from the point of view that they advertise a lot, but consumers exchange and interact with them on a daily basis. So there are companies that are significant. That is different, because you could look at, for instance, the top 10 listed companies. You could look at companies, for instance, with the highest turnover. But our methodology looks at the top 50 most visible, and hence it is called the top companies reputation index.
Advertising spend. That's your,
that's your
gate.
Advertising spend, which, needless to say, also reflects on companies that the public is most familiar with. They know a lot about them, and therefore they're in a position to speak in an informed way about those particular companies. And in another aspect also, I believe, in terms of this study, we have the largest sample of companies, 163 companies. In addition to the top 50, we also look at all of their competitors. So if a company is not one of the top 50 spenders, we also consider it on the basis that it is a competitor to one of the top 50 spenders. And plus, we look at key industries such as the oil industry, the pharmaceutical industry. So there's an exhaustive coverage of over 3,000 respondents and over 160 companies that are included in the survey.
I'll ask you about who the respondents are in a moment, but let's bring Vukani in. Coca-Cola comes top in a lot of these surveys, and it's one of those brands, it's what they call a monolithic brand in the sense of being the company and the brand all together. Unlike, say, an SA Breweries, which has its individual brands and then there's a corporate brand behind it. That must help you. The product is the corporate.
I think there's a distinction. I mean, the corporate is what you do in terms of what you do for your communities. The brand is what the consistency of the product. So in some regards, I would say, yes, it does, but I think they're two distinct. There's the corporate brand that, as I'm saying, is the brand that literally, the impact on me as a consumer, me as a person in a community. And there's me, the consumer, who consumes the brand and enjoys its refreshing taste.
So what are you doing that makes you top? I mean, there's some pretty big heavyweight companies below you: Pick n Pay, Vodacom, MTN, Toyota, Volkswagen, Telkom, Unilever, SAB, I mentioned a moment ago. And it's not because they like the Coke that they are voting you top in this.
I think it's about trust. When you've been a brand that's been around for 128 years globally and almost 87 years here in South Africa, I think there's a consistency there. It's a company that's been around for a long time, and in order to be around for a long time, you've got to be doing something right. So product integrity first and foremost, giving back to the communities where we operate first and foremost. So I think it's a combination of those, trusting in terms of the brand, the product that you're drinking, and a corporate citizen in terms of giving back to the communities where we operate. And we know that without thriving communities, as a brand and as a company, we wouldn't thrive either.
Who do you ask? Whose opinions do you ask for this, and how many are there?
Theoretically, every South African that is 18 years and above should qualify to take part in the study. The study currently takes place in all urban areas in all of the 9 provinces of South Africa, all major urban centers in the 9 provinces. The criteria is that the person should be familiar with the company that they're rating, so that they don't just state things out of the top of their head, but they actually are familiar with the company that they're rating. The total sample was 3,042 respondents. If I may even chip in on what you asked Vukani just now in terms of the brand, the company, and the brand, the product, that is only one aspect of the reputation measure that we have, which is recognition. But we have 8 other pillars, for instance, vision and leadership. And Coca-Cola does very well in that. Financial performance and the corporate social investment. which is why I think the reputation measure is important, because it's not just focused on products and services, but it spreads itself to include corporate communications, how you engage with the public.
So let's run through those products and services you mentioned, vision and leadership you mentioned, workplace environment, BBBEE, CSR, corporate social responsibility, financial performance, of course, governance, corporate communication you mentioned, and recognition. So, Vukani, these 3,000 people that were asked, they might not all know about BBE or corporate communications or governance. So how do you communicate these sorts of things to the people out there? I mean, they might be recognized, you might know you've built a school, but what do they know about your governance?
I mean, I think a company like Coke that, as I said, the longevity builds trust. And I think our chairman and CEO, Muhtar Kent, has coined for us something called the Golden Triangle, the intersect of business, government, and civil society in terms of giving back. So I think Coke, in many dimensions, besides the product, we're out there in the communities making sure that
I can see that, but I'm concerned about the individual. I'm imagining being asked about these big companies. I could talk probably about 4 or 5 characteristics of these top companies, but I wouldn't necessarily know about their governance or their vision and leadership if I'm a man in the street.
Yeah, most possibly. And if you look at Coca-Cola, what stands out for it is being well accepted and loved, but also communication stands out for Coca-Cola, and the recognition that they are an esteemed business. And a lot of the other things, such as the governance, might flow from the fact that they are an established business that is respected and well loved and is involved. They were involved, for instance, in the 20th anniversary of our democracy and the World Cup and such things. And from that, then, respondents might infer, maybe not having heard of anything too negative that might have happened around Coca-Cola, that things such as governance, about which, as you rightly point out, they might not know a lot, they might then infer, make an inference that those are in place.
So what happens next with this research? These companies presumably very pleased, particularly the ones in the top 10 and so on. Do they use it? How do you use it?
We use it to communicate to them the most important thing, which is that their reputation counts. Because in the day we live in now, it's all about sustainability. And big business, we see Fortune 500 companies around the world, they're all doing what is called triple bottom line reporting. And our businesses also need to be leading the way in terms of reducing unemployment, in terms of the increasing spend that consumers need to engage in. So they're using this information. It doesn't help that we are being degraded in terms of the global competitiveness indices. That will not help us to create more employment. And part of the first pillar of the World Economic Forum's competitiveness index is actually to do with institutions.
We'll have to stop there, I'm afraid, but this is, where can we find this this list? The TCRI, if we Google that, top 50 most reputable businesses, plus 94, that's where we'll find it.
Plus94.co.za. You'll also find the results on the Mail and Guardian sites, mg.co.za.
People love lists, and well done to Coca-Cola for coming top of the list with a score of 85.63. Thanks to Sifiso Falala, CEO and founder of Plus94 Research, and Vukani Magubane, who is Director and Public Affairs and Communications at Coca-Cola South Africa.